jump straight in. I want to ask you just broadly, quickly about South Africa in the World Cup so far. Obviously, that match against Zim was rained out. That was super disappointing. But a good comeback against Bangladesh now. Quite a convincing win. Very comprehensive, and from a batting perspective specifically, really encouraging. I want to get your general thoughts around South Africa.
I think they're a well-balanced team to me. I think if anything, if I had to look at any area in that team, it's probably lacking another quality all-rounder like Australia possessing, maybe a Cam Green, Stoinis, or even a Mitch Marsh for that matter. But I think what I like about their team now, they've got a lot of dynamic players. There are a lot of X-factor players in Bada and Gidi, Nokia, two high-quality spin bowlers, and power in the batting. So I think that's one thing they lacked last World Cup. I think they've addressed it now and brought some additions in that can actually be explosive. And they can win a game from anywhere now. No game is sort of out of their chances of getting over the line. Maybe last World Cup or even a few years ago, once a team got 200 or 180, you probably thought, oh, it's going to be a tough chase. But with the resources they have available now, you feel that they can take on the best teams in the world. So that's encouraging and gives them a chance, to win. Of course, World Cups are tricky. I think the rain during this World Cup has added an extra dimension to it a little bit. So, it's going to be tricky the first 2 weeks. Hopefully the weather improves and we can start seeing proper head-to-head matches without the toss being that important.
Right. I want to pick up the Temba Bavuma issue. I think it's important for South Africa that he succeeds. But I want to cast a broader lens on the Bavuma issue and speak about, from a coaching perspective, what sorts of coaching interventions, how do you decide on the type of coaching intervention that a player that is struggling needs? When do you go, okay, this is a technical intervention, this is more of a human touch that is needed, or when do you go, we need a hybrid of the two?
I think that really goes, is really about your relationship with the player. I think everyone's different. There's a lot of things documented on, personalization, whether it's shopping, and that's no different from coaching a cricketer. You need to understand the person behind the skill. And I know it's very cliche what you're saying, but it is true. You need to know what makes them tick, what motivates them, and what type of language to use to inspire them to a performance. The whole Temba situation, I can't see it being a technical thing personally. I think it's a real sit-down chat, I guess, with a coach and trying to figure out how you can best maximize where he's at the moment in his T20 game. So it's a complicated situation. I don't think there's any right or wrong, Ryan. I think it takes a lot of hours getting to know someone and what makes them tick, and actually understanding the foundations of their game and their cricket, and trying to dig a little bit deeper and when they're performing well, what they like, what does their training look like, what does their day-to-day look like, because often those little things influence the performance. Is everything okay at home?
Yeah.
That's why I'm not a massive fan of sports psychologists, but I think there's a place for some sort of performance person within cricket setups now, where we've just come out of a COVID era into things are back to normal. It'll take a while, and cricketers will have to adjust, and management styles will have to adjust alongside that.
Right. I want to talk about a tactical dimension of the Proteas now. Leading up to this World Cup for the last calendar year, they've backed two spinners. Where we saw in the game against Zim, they went with an extra all-rounder, but in against Bangladesh, they switched back to Keshav and Shamsi. That's quite encouraging for me from a tactical perspective, to be that agile, to have those options. Is a really encouraging thing. We spoke about the weaponry that we had at the last World Cup, and if you track the side's development, they've definitely improved in this dimension. And I wanted to know about the dynamic of playing two spinners versus when you go with the extra batter, extra all-rounder, etc., and just your thoughts around that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to those little details, I think it's a horses for courses thing. I think the encouraging thing you alluded to is the agility to go from one strategy to the next, from game to game, because that's what requires to win a World Cup. You could go from playing at Perth on a fast bouncy wicket to playing at the SCG where it's a little bit flatter and traditionally spinners come into play. So it's nice to know that we have the tools and we're starting to select, the right personnel to give us the opportunity to win the game. To win games consistently across conditions. So that is encouraging. But I think when it comes to deciding whether to play two spinners or one spinner or the makeup of your fast bowling attack, I think that's a lot to do with horses for courses, which I mean, we've all know in cricket. But I think the data sets in cricket have become a lot more specific now, where you actually play a team like Bangladesh, and you saw Lungi and Giri didn't play.
Yeah.
They brought in Anrich Nokia, which or like they held on to Anrich Nokia rather, let me say. They probably looked at Bangladesh's data sets around how they play bowling above 145 consistently and what their strike rates are, and the damage a bowler of that pace can do. So that'll probably an extra layer in terms of factoring in when selecting 11s against different opposition. It may be different now against India. We may see all pace come into the attack, and maybe Aiden Markram and Tristan Stubbs will maybe be asked to bowl a few more overs in terms of spin if required. So it's nice to see the flexibility within that group.
I want to talk about pressure. You've been to a World Cup. I'd imagine that at the elite level, there's always pressure, irrespective of where you're playing, what competition you've played in. But I also imagine that a World Cup introduces a different dimension of pressure. And like I say, you've traveled to a World Cup, and I wanted to know, in a team environment, and perhaps your observations of individuals, how that exhibits itself.
I think World Cups are completely different. So whatever form going into from bilateral series, it's a completely different feel. You go play a bilateral series, you can lose 2, win 3, you still win the series. World Cups, there's a lot more media attention around it. All of a sudden, you're in hotels with all these ICC staff, media, high-powered, executives. You're in a hotel with 4 teams as opposed to 2, so you're sharing the gym. There's a different dynamic completely to it, and for me, the intensity is a lot different. You can definitely feel it. You can play against a team like Pakistan in a bilateral series, for example, and you can feel they're operating on 70%. And all of a sudden, you play them in a World Cup, and it's like they've gone to 100+%. You know, and that's what World Cups do. They bring the best out of people. So there is a different pressure. I think what the challenging thing is, that probably for South Africa in the past, is that we like the consistency of a bilateral series, whereas a World Cup, you're playing a different opposition every day in different conditions with a lot more hype around it. So it does ask a lot of you as a player to keep thinking on your feet and shifting your mentality. Not the mindset to try and win every game, but more shifting tactically and strategically in your thinking on how to tackle the opposition to give your team the best chance to perform. So there are those other layers to a World Cup that bilateral series can never replicate. But, you run quicker. I mean, the statistics show in cricket, you run faster at the World Cup. You do bigger distances. Bowlers bowl quicker. Batters hit the ball further. So it definitely is a different element of stress on the body. And in terms of, it also a lot more of your physical capabilities too.
Right. I wanted to talk about they were following that Zim result. There were lots of allegations of time wasting on Zim's part. And obviously, Dave Houghton, the coach of Zim, came out afterwards, and you were saying that we shouldn't have even gone onto the field. But I want to kind of cast the scope broader there. And I want to know what your thoughts on that were. Allegations of time wasting. But I wanted to know if you've maybe thought about a plan or a strategy or some sort of law that would help you circumvent big World Cup matches being disrupted by rain in the way that they have. Or do we kind of accept it for what it is?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I don't think Duckworth Lewis-Stern method is the perfect method for T20 cricket. I think they don't factor in wickets in hand like they do maybe in 50-over cricket as much. So I think there needs to definitely be some sort of different algorithm in place to try and figure it out. In terms of some time wasting, I think this is part and parcel of the game. I think I saw it 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I thought it was really unfair asking Zim to go into that outfield and try and sort of defend that total where, I mean, it was near impossible to even field in those conditions. So I thought that was a little bit hard done, right? And then I thought, so their time wasting element, trying to bring in the rain, that play, that's just, you can question whether it's spirit of the game or just being smart, because sometimes at a World Cup, you have to be smart. I mean, we saw Luis Suarez do it in the Football World Cup. You can argue spirit of football, spirit of sport, and all sorts. But the team went through, at the end of the day. And that's what sometimes it takes to win a World Cup. You have to be smart and think on your feet. In terms of, what they can do, I thought South Africa was hard done by. I thought they, after 5 overs, which constitutes a game in T20 cricket, they had more than their tally of runs required. I think maybe that's something you could bring into play where you don't have to have 5 overs. If they got there in the required, if it was 3 overs and they got to the required runs, I think points should be handed to the team that's actually made an attempt to try and win the game, because that's what T20 cricket's about. It's about actually, encouraging positive play. And that's what South Africa did. They gave it their all. And still, at the end of the day, they were penalized for it in many ways. So that's what I'll do. Until we play cricket in domes, Ron, I don't think you're going to have a perfect answer to this. I think it's going to be experiential all the way. But I think definitely a different algorithm needs to be discussed. There's so many clever people in the world, but surely there's someone that has come up with something.
Absolutely. Ravi, I wanted to ask you, on the evidence of what we've seen in the first week of the tourney, would you say that the smaller associates have closed the gap on the elite in this format? Or does it remain wide and just attributable to the nature of T20 cricket that we've seen the results that we've seen?
I think a little bit of both. I think what you have in the associate countries, they play a lot of white ball cricket. So they fed on a diet of that. So they really, really do play a lot of T20 and 50-over cricket. I think you can't really call Ireland, they're a full member now. Afghanistan's a full member now. So you could probably call them half and half in terms of full member and associate countries. They still, going into the era of proper professionalism in their structures. But I do think what's the change, where I feel the biggest change has happened, is there's a better understanding of T20 cricket, one. Data can help you get over the line. So your sum of all parts, which actually is what the associate strengths are, can actually beat the bigger team. Not consistently, but every now and then you'll have a situation where you'll find the Netherlands beating England, or like you have an Ireland beat an England. So, and a lot of these associate players are starting to be involved in different leagues all over the world. So, they're getting up to speed with best practice and different skills, how to think, how to tackle different situations. So that gap is definitely narrowing, which is great for the world game, because we don't want 8 teams dominating it. We want, when you play in the pool stages now, you want the Netherlands to be able to beat someone and just throw the pool wide open. Okay. So I do think that's been a great, shift in the world game, especially T20 cricket.
Right. Rabah, you mentioned data quite a few times throughout this chat that we've had. And obviously, as the broader cricket fraternity, we don't have insight or access to that data, that type of data. But I'd imagine those 1%ers make a massive difference in the broader kind of context. And I was wondering if you can maybe give me some insight to the type of data that you got access to, the type of data that coaches at your level use to improve your team.
I think the higher level you go, it does get a little bit more detailed. I think it does make the difference. I mean, sometimes you just from a skills perspective, you're just not on the same page as your opposition. So you need to ensure that every decision you make is based around, some sort of data sets around the opposition's game to give you a chance to compete. And hopefully if you compete, you can get to a position within the game where you can win it. Yeah. Those data sets are incredibly important, not only for coaches, but I think for players. understanding what's coming at them, so they can prepare mentally and tactically and strategically, and you can give them some sort of support around that. And when putting together a strategy when facing your opposition, you might play against the opening batter where left arm spin is not his forte, and you decide to open the bowling with left arm spin, for example, bowling at him outside the power play, bowlers that are quick and tall and bowl 140. We made that the stats or the data sets around his game around that particular skill, when he faces that particular skill, is not that strong and tends to get him out. So, these are the margins we're talking about at the moment. Who to bowl, a player's form 1 to 6 overs in the power play, 7 to 14, and then 15 to 20. I mean, you're looking at segments around a T20 game, whether he's good at leg spin, off spin, left arm seam round the wicket, left arm seam cutters. So there's a whole host of things that you have to go through. But it's not to give the player everything, it's to give them the essentials to help their game, so they can have a contribution within the game.
Right. Let's finish off on this. What team has impressed you most in this early part of the tournament? And who's your favorite at this stage?
I hate to say it, but it's always New Zealand for some reason. This name keeps cropping up. They seem well organized, well drilled. I don't think the one thing New Zealand cricket have, they don't have a big player base, so their players are almost like associates. They play a lot together for long periods of time, and I think they're pretty well drilled off the field, and they're a little bit like Pakistan. You can beat them in a bilateral series, but come World Cup time, they seem to just gel together.
Yeah.
They've got great resources in their bowling, I think. A great fielding unit always. You never see New Zealand have a bad day in the fielding. And then they look like they've added guys like Finn Allen, Devon Conway's come in and he's been a great addition to their team. And Daryl Mitchell, he's still to come back into their squad after injury. So they look very well drilled and organized to me. So they've been the team to look out for. But, for me, you can't go far from India, Pakistan, Australia when it comes to World Cups.
Yeah.
So there are a few teams, but I'd have to say at the initial stages, New Zealand look really, really good to me.
Awesome. Rob, thank you for joining me. I appreciate that so much.
No problem. Anytime, huh?
Have a lekker gym session.
Cheers, man.
Cheers, bro. Bye.